The sleek black Bentley made an awful grinding noise as it limped to the side of the highway. Inside, Grace Wilson slammed her palm against the steering wheel. As the CEO of Wilson Global Investments, she was used to things working exactly as they should. People jumped when she spoke. Machines functioned flawlessly, and expensive cars definitely did not break down on deserted stretches of highway when she was already running. Late for the most important merger meeting of the quarter, Grace grabbed her phone and dialed her assistant. "Thomas, the car's dead. I'm about 30 miles outside of Riverside. I need a tow and a replacement vehicle immediately." "I'm on it, Ms. Wilson," Thomas replied, "but there might be a delay. The nearest luxury dealership is closed for renovations, and the high-end towing service we use doesn't cover that area." "Then find someone who does," Grace snapped, checking her watch. "The Nakamura team is landing in 3 hours, and I need to be there." 20 minutes later, a faded blue tow truck pulled up behind her Bentley. The logo on the door read Carter's Auto Repair with family-owned since 1978, underneath in smaller letters. Grace watched through her rearview mirror as a tall man stepped out. He wore navy blue work clothes with Andre stitched on the chest pocket. His hands were large and his forearms muscular, the body of someone who worked with his hands for a living. Grace stepped out of her car, designer heels clicking on the asphalt. "Are you the mechanic?" The man nodded. "Andre Carter. Your assistant called about a breakdown." Grace gestured to her car with obvious frustration. It started making this horrible grinding noise, then just died. "I need it fixed immediately. I have an important meeting." Andre knelt beside the car, popping the hood with practiced ease. Grace watched impatiently as he examined the engine, his expression serious and focused. She checked her watch again. "Can you fix it or not? I don't have all day." "This is a custom W12 engine with specialized parts," Andre said without looking up. "I'll need to take it back to my shop to diagnose properly." Grace let out an exasperated sigh. "Listen, I'm the CEO of Wilson Global Investments. I have a meeting with international clients in 3 hours. I don't have time for this." Andre stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. His face remained neutral despite her tone. "I understand you're in a hurry, ma'am, but this isn't a quick fix. This engine has been modified. Whoever worked on it last did something unusual with the timing belt configuration." Grace crossed her arms. She'd paid top dollar for those performance enhancements at the dealership in the city. The car had never given her trouble before. "How long will it take you to fix it?" she demanded. "Hard to say without a proper diagnosis. Could be a few hours, could be a few days if I need specialized parts." "A few days?" Grace laughed bitterly. "Unacceptable. My regular mechanic in the city could fix this in an afternoon." Andre's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Then perhaps you should call them." "They're 3 hours away," Grace snapped. She was hot, frustrated, and facing a business disaster if she missed this meeting. The stress was making her nastier than usual. "Look, I'll make it worth your while. Fix this engine by this afternoon and I'll pay you triple your usual rate." Andre shook his head. "Money doesn't change the reality of the work involved. I can't promise what isn't possible." Grace was not used to hearing the word can't. In her world, everything was possible with enough money and pressure. She looked at the mechanic standing confidently before her, seemingly unmoved by her status or her offer. Something about his calm refusal infuriated her. "You know what?" she said, a sarcastic edge sharpening her voice. "Fix this engine properly and I'll marry you." The words hung in the air between them. Even as they left her mouth, Grace knew she had crossed a line. It was condescending, inappropriate, and revealed assumptions about him that made her look terrible. But pride kept her from taking it back. Andre's face remained impressively neutral. He simply looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "I'll tow your car to my shop and see what I can do," he finally said, his voice even. "I can give you a ride into town. There's a hotel where you can wait, and a car rental place 2 blocks down." Grace felt a flush of embarrassment creep up her neck. She had expected him to react, to get angry or laugh it off or make some comment back. Instead, his professionalism in the face of her rudeness only highlighted how poorly she was behaving. "Fine," she said, reaching into her car for her purse and laptop bag. As Andre hooked her Bentley to his tow truck, Grace called Thomas to update him and arrange for the merger documents to be sent digitally. She would have to conduct the meeting virtually from whatever hotel room she could find in this small town. The ride into town was quiet. Grace sat stiffly in the passenger seat of the tow truck, staring out the window at the unfamiliar landscape. Small houses gave way to a modest main street lined with family-owned businesses. It couldn't have been more different from the sleek corporate environment she was accustomed to. "The Riverside Inn is just ahead," Andre said, breaking the silence. "It's clean and has good Wi-Fi. The owner's name is Diane." Grace nodded, still too embarrassed to look directly at him. As they pulled up to the small hotel, Andre added, "I'll call you once I've diagnosed the problem with your car." Grace finally turned to face him. "I apologize for what I said earlier. It was inappropriate and disrespectful." Andre met her eyes. "We all say things we don't mean when we're stressed. I'll do my best with your car." He helped her with her bags, then drove away with her Bentley in tow. Grace stood on the sidewalk of the unfamiliar town, watching until the blue truck turned a corner and disappeared from sight. Inside the hotel, a friendly older woman checked her in and showed her to a surprisingly comfortable room. Grace set up her laptop, connected to the Wi-Fi, and tried to focus on preparing for her virtual meeting. But her mind kept returning to the look in Andre's eyes when she'd made that thoughtless comment. She had built her reputation on being tough, but fair. What she'd said to him had been neither, and something told her that this small-town mechanic might have more to teach her than just how to fix an engine. The bell above the door of Carter's Auto Repair jingled as Andre walked in, wiping sweat from his brow. The summer heat was intense, making the already difficult job of towing the expensive Bentley even more challenging. His Uncle Ray looked up from the computer where he was managing the shop's accounts. "That the fancy car you mentioned on the phone?" Ray asked, nodding toward the window where the black Bentley gleamed in the afternoon sun. "Yeah," Andre said, hanging his keys on the wall hook. "Custom W12 engine. Someone did some non-standard modifications to it. Going to be a challenge," Ray whistled low. "Those aren't easy to work on even when they're stock." "What's the owner like?" "Usual rich type." Andre poured himself a cup of coffee, considering his response. "CEO of some investment firm. She's under a lot of pressure." He didn't mention her inappropriate comment. Something about the flash of regret he'd seen in her eyes made him keep that part to himself. People said stupid things when they were stressed, and while her words had stung, he'd dealt with worse. "I need to clear the bay and get started on diagnostics," Andre said, changing the subject. "Can you finish up the Henderson truck today? I promised Mrs. Henderson I'd have it ready by morning." Ray nodded, and Andre headed out to begin working on the Bentley. Once he had it positioned on the lift, he began a methodical examination of the engine. His hands moved with practiced precision, his mind fully engaged in solving the puzzle before him. This was why he loved his work. Each vehicle presented a unique challenge, a problem waiting to be solved. 3 hours later, Andre had identified the main issue. The timing belt had been installed incorrectly during the last service, causing damage to multiple components in the engine. It wasn't a quick fix, and some of the parts would need to be ordered. He wiped his hands and went to make the call he'd been putting off. "Ms. Wilson, this is Andre Carter from Carter's Auto Repair." "Yes?" Her voice was clipped, professional. "I've completed the diagnostic on your Bentley. The timing belt was improperly installed during your last service, which has damaged several components in the engine." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Can you fix it?" "Yes, but I'll need to order some specialized parts. They won't arrive until tomorrow at the earliest." He heard her sigh. "I see, and how long after the parts arrive?" "At least a full day of work. These engines are complex, and I need to do it right." "Of course," she said, surprising him with her calmer tone. "I've arranged to stay at the Riverside Inn for now." "My meeting went better than expected given the circumstances." "That's good to hear," Andre replied, genuinely relieved for her. There was an awkward pause before she spoke again. "Mr. Carter, Andre, I want to apologize again for my comment earlier. It was completely unprofessional and disrespectful." "Thank you for saying that," he said simply. "I'll need a rental car while I wait. Is there somewhere reliable in town?" "The place I mentioned is called Johnson's Rentals, just 2 blocks from your hotel. They don't have luxury vehicles, but their cars are well maintained. I can give them a call if you'd like." "That would be helpful, thank you." After ending the call, Andre contacted Johnson's Rentals and arranged for their best available car to be prepared for Grace. Then he began ordering the necessary parts for the Bentley, calling in favors from suppliers he knew to expedite delivery. The next morning, Andre arrived at the shop earlier than usual. He had a full day of regular appointments, but he wanted to make space for the Bentley repairs once the parts arrived. Around noon, the delivery truck pulled up with the parts he'd ordered. As he was signing for the delivery, a modest sedan pulled into the parking lot. Grace Wilson stepped out, looking different than she had the day before. She wore dark jeans and a simple blouse instead of her designer suit, though her posture and confident walk still marked her as someone accustomed to authority. "Mr. Carter," she greeted him as she approached. "I thought I'd check on the progress in person." "The parts just arrived," Andre replied, gesturing to the boxes being unloaded. "I'll begin work this afternoon." Grace nodded, then surprised him by asking, "Would it be possible to watch some of the repair process? I realized I have no idea how this car actually works despite how much I paid for it." Andre considered this unusual request. Customers rarely showed interest in the technical aspects of repairs. "I don't mind, but it's hot in the workshop and it can get messy." "I don't mind," she echoed his words with the hint of a smile. "I've been answering emails in that hotel room all morning. A change of scenery would be welcome." Andre led her into the workshop, finding her a stool at a safe distance where she could observe without being in the way. As he began unpacking the parts and organizing his tools, he felt her watching him with genuine interest. "How long have you been a mechanic?" she asked. "Officially about 12 years, Andre replied, laying out his tools in precise order. "But I've been taking apart engines since I was a kid. My father opened this shop in 1978, so it's a family business," Grace observed. "Is your father still involved?" Andre's hands paused momentarily. "He passed away 5 years ago. My Uncle Ray and I run it now." "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, and her voice held genuine sympathy. As Andre began working on the engine, he found himself explaining each step of the process. Grace asked thoughtful questions, showing more intelligence about mechanical systems than he'd expected. There was something satisfying about sharing his knowledge with someone who actually wanted to understand. "Most people think expensive cars are more reliable," Andre explained as he carefully removed the damaged timing belt. "But often they're just more complicated. More things that can go wrong." "Like people," Grace commented. Andre glanced up, catching a self-deprecating smile on her face. By late afternoon, Andre had made significant progress on the repairs. Grace had stepped out for lunch and returned with sandwiches for both of them, which they ate while discussing the differences between various engine designs. "I should let you finish your work," Grace said eventually, standing up. "Thank you for letting me observe. It's been educational." "You're welcome to come back tomorrow," Andre found himself saying. "That's when I'll be putting it all back together. That's the satisfying part." Grace looked surprised, then pleased. "I'd like that." After she left, Ray wandered into the workshop, eyebrows raised questioningly. "Don't start," Andre warned him good-naturedly. "Didn't say a word," Ray replied with a grin. "But that's not your typical CEO, is it?" Andre turned back to the engine, a thoughtful expression on his face. "No, she's not what I expected." The next day, Grace returned as promised. She arrived just as Andre was preparing to reassemble the engine components. She had brought coffee for both of them from the local cafe. "Black, right?" she said, handing him a cup. "You remembered," Andre said, surprised. Most people didn't notice details like how he took his coffee. "I pay attention to details. It's part of my job," she replied with a shrug. As Andre worked, he continued his impromptu automotive education. Grace was an attentive student, asking insightful questions that showed she was truly absorbing the information. Occasionally, she would share anecdotes about her work in the investment world, and Andre found himself interested in the parallels between their very different careers. "In both our jobs, it comes down to solving problems," Grace observed. "Just different types of problems. And different tools," Andre added, holding up a specialized wrench. "Though I bet your problems don't get fixed with one of these." Grace laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "You'd be surprised. Sometimes I wish I could just tighten a few bolts on some of my more difficult clients." By late afternoon, Andre was making the final adjustments to the engine. Grace had been watching the entire process with fascination. "Almost done," Andre said, stepping back to examine his work. "Just need to run some tests to make sure everything's functioning properly." "How did you learn to do all this?" Grace asked. "It seems so complex," Started with formal training, but a lot of it is experience, Andre replied, wiping his hands. Every engine tells a story if you know how to listen. Grace nodded thoughtfully. I never thought about it that way. I just expect things to work. Most people do, Andre said, closing the hood. Until they don't. He started the engine, listening carefully to the sound. The Bentley purred to life, the engine noise smooth and even. No grinding, no irregularities. Andre felt the satisfaction that always came with a job well done. It sounds perfect, Grace said, standing beside him now. It is, Andre confirmed, unable to keep the pride from his voice. Your car is fixed. Grace looked at the Bentley, then back at Andre, a curious expression on her face. You know, I made a very inappropriate joke yesterday about marrying you if you fix the engine. Andre felt his shoulders tense slightly. That wasn't necessary to bring up again. We both know you were just stressed. Yes, but I'd like to make it up to you properly, Grace said. Not with marriage, obviously, but perhaps dinner? As a thank you for the exceptional service in the automotive education. The offer caught Andre by surprise. That's not necessary, Ms. Wilson, I'm just doing my job. Grace, she corrected him. And I know it's not necessary. But I'd like to, unless you'd rather not. Andre considered the woman standing before him, so different from the angry CEO who had made that thoughtless comment. Just yesterday. People contained multitudes, he reminded himself. Sometimes they deserved a second chance. Dinner would be nice, he said finally. There's a good place just down the street. Grace smiled, a genuine warmth reaching her eyes. Perfect. And afterward you can tell me what other modifications I should consider for this car. Clearly my city mechanics don't know what they're doing. The small restaurant buzzed with the comfortable chatter of locals enjoying their evening meals. It wasn't fancy, no white tablecloths or sommelier, but the wooden tables gleamed with polish, and the delicious aromas wafting from the kitchen promised authentic, homemade food. Grace sat across from Andre, feeling strangely out of her element. This wasn't the type of restaurant where she normally dined, and this definitely wasn't her typical dinner companion. Yet somehow she felt more at ease than she had in months. I hope you like this place, Andre said, pouring her a glass of water. Lily's been running this restaurant for almost 30 years. Best comfort food in 3 counties. It smells amazing, Grace admitted. Honestly, after 2 days of hotel room service, anything would be a welcome change. A woman in her 60s approached their table, her smile widening when she saw Andre. Well, if it isn't my favorite mechanic, haven't seen you in here for a while. Her curious gaze shifted to Grace. Been busy at the shop, Lily, Andre explained. This is Grace. Her car broke down outside town and I've been working on it. Welcome to Riverside, honey, Lily said warmly. Any friend of Andre's is a friend of mine. Now what can I get you to tonight? After they ordered, Grace found herself asking the question that had been on her mind since watching Andre work. Did you always want to be a mechanic? You seem to have a real talent for it. Andre took a sip of his water, considering the question. Not exactly. I actually studied mechanical engineering in college. Got a scholarship to State University and graduated with honors. Grace couldn't hide her surprise. Really? That's impressive. Don't look so shocked, Andre said with a slight smile. You aren't the first person to assume I don't have a degree. Grace felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply. Andre waved off her apology. It's fine. But yes, I did the corporate route for a while. Worked for an automotive design firm in Detroit for 3 years after graduation. What brought you back here then? Grace asked, genuinely curious. Andre's expression grew more serious. My father got sick. Stage 4 lung cancer. I came home to help with the shop while he was in treatment. After he passed, I just stayed. Uncle Ray needed the help. And I found I actually preferred working with my hands. Fixing things directly rather than designing parts that someone else would build. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. Grace took a bite of her chicken pot pie and had to stifle a moan of appreciation. It really was exceptional. This is delicious, she said after swallowing. You weren't exaggerating. Andre nodded, digging into his own meal. Told you. Lily doesn't mess around when it comes to food. So, Andre said after a few moments of companionable eating. Your turn. Did you always want to be a CEO? Grace laughed softly. God, no. I wanted to be a vet when I was little. Then a lawyer. Then a professor. What changed? She twirled her fork thoughtfully. I took an economics class in college and found I had a knack for understanding financial systems. Then I interned at an investment firm and discovered I enjoyed the challenge, the strategy of it. The rest just happened step by step. Just happened? Andre looked skeptical. I doubt anything in your career just happened. You strike me as someone who makes things happen. Grace smiled at his perception. Fair enough. I worked incredibly hard. Long hours, sacrificed a lot of personal time. Fought against people who didn't take me seriously because I was young, female, or both. And now you run the whole company, Andre concluded. I founded it, Grace corrected him. Wilson Global Investments is my creation. Started it 8 years ago after leaving my previous firm. It was Andre's turn to look impressed. That's a major achievement. Thank you, Grace said, feeling a strange pleasure at his genuine admiration. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. As they continued eating, their conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic. Grace found herself sharing stories about difficult clients and market challenges. Andre told her about particularly interesting repair jobs and his ideas for expanding the auto shop's services. I'd like to start offering electric vehicle maintenance, he explained. The future's heading that way, and most shops around here aren't equipped for it yet. That's smart thinking, Grace agreed. Staying ahead of market trends is essential in any business. As they finished their meals, Lily returned to check on them. How was everything? Perfect as always, Andre assured her. Absolutely delicious, Grace added sincerely. Best meal I've had in months. Lily beamed at the compliment. Well, any friend of Andre's is welcome back any time. You know, he's the one who kept this place running when my kitchen equipment broke down last year. Fixed everything and wouldn't take a dime for it. Grace raised an eyebrow at Andre after Lily left. You wouldn't accept payment? Andre shrugged. Community takes care of each other here. Lily's been feeding half the town for decades, including giving free meals to kids who can't afford lunch. Fixing her kitchen was the least I could do. As they walked out of the restaurant into the cool evening air, Grace felt a strange reluctance to end the evening. It had been a long time since she'd enjoyed conversation this much. No business agendas, no networking motives, just genuine human connection. There's a nice walking path along the river, Andre suggested, seeming equally reluctant to say goodnight. If you'd like to stretch your legs after dinner. I'd like that, Grace replied. The riverside path was simple but beautiful, with old-fashioned lampposts casting a warm glow on the water. A few other people strolled along, nodding friendly greetings as they passed. It's so peaceful here, Grace observed. Different from the city. That's what I love about it, Andre said. Don't get me wrong. The city has its advantages. More opportunities, more diversity. But there's something about knowing your neighbors. Being part of something smaller where your actions matter. They paused at a bench overlooking the water, sitting down to watch the moonlight ripple on the surface. Can I ask you something personal? Grace said after a comfortable silence. Sure. When I made that thoughtless comment yesterday, about marrying you if you fixed the engine, why didn't you get angry? You had every right to be. Andre looked out at the water for a long moment before answering. Would being angry have fixed anything? Would it have changed your mind or made the situation better? Probably not, Grace admitted. I've learned to pick my battles, Andre said simply. I've dealt with much worse comments than yours, and I could tell you regretted it almost immediately. I did, Grace confirmed. It was completely out of line. We all make mistakes, Andre said. What matters is how we respond afterward. You apologized twice, and you've treated me with respect since then. That says more about your character than that one comment. Grace felt a wave of gratitude for his generosity. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Everyone deserves one of those now and then, Andre replied with a small smile. As they continued their walk, Grace found herself sharing more personal details about her life. Her difficult relationship with her parents, who had never approved of her career choice. Her struggle to maintain friendships while building her company. The loneliness that sometimes accompanied success. Andre listened without judgment, offering occasional insights that showed both intelligence and emotional depth. In turn, he told her about his father's influence on his life, his decision to return to Riverside permanently, and his hopes for the auto shop's future. I want to start a training program for high school students, he explained as they made their way back toward the town center. Give them practical skills, maybe spark an interest in engineering or mechanics. There aren't many opportunities for young people in this town. That's a wonderful idea, Grace said. Have you looked into grants for that sort of program? Andre shook his head. Not yet. Wouldn't know where to start, honestly. Business plans and funding applications aren't exactly my area of expertise. They happen to be mine, Grace said, a new idea forming in her mind. I could help you put together a proposal if you'd like. Andre stopped walking, turning to look at her with surprise. You'd do that? You must be incredibly busy with your own company. I am, Grace acknowledged. But this is important work, and I've been thinking lately that I should use my skills for something more meaningful than just making wealthy people wealthier. They had reached the Riverside Inn, where Grace was staying. Standing under the warm glow of the porch light, she felt strangely reluctant to say goodnight. Thank you for dinner, she said, and the walk. It was refreshing. Thank you for the company, Andre replied, and for the offer to help with the training program. I might take you up on that. I hope you do, Grace said sincerely. There was a moment of awkward silence before Andre spoke again. Your car will be ready tomorrow morning. I've done a full check of all systems and everything's in perfect working order. I appreciate the thoroughness, Grace said. What do I owe you for the repairs? Andre named a figure that seemed surprisingly reasonable given the complexity of the work he'd done. That's all? Grace asked, genuinely surprised. In the city, this would have cost 3 times as much. We have lower overhead here, Andre explained with a shrug. And I'm not trying to get rich, just make a decent living doing work I enjoy. Something about his words struck Grace deeply. When was the last time she'd truly enjoyed her work? The challenge and the success, yes, but the actual day-to-day experience of it? She couldn't remember. What time should I come by the shop tomorrow? She asked. Any time after 8, Andre replied. I'll have the paperwork ready. Grace hesitated, then said, I was planning to drive back to the city tomorrow, but I might stay another day. I could help you start outlining that training program proposal if you're interested. Andre's smile was warm and genuine. I'd like that very much. There's a coffee shop next to the garage. They have good Wi-Fi if you need to work remotely too. Perfect, Grace said, returning his smile. I'll see you tomorrow then. As she watched him walk away, Grace realized that her car breaking down, something she had viewed as a disaster just 2 days ago, had somehow become one of the most unexpectedly meaningful experiences she'd had in years. Tomorrow would bring difficult decisions about returning to her high-pressure life in the city. But tonight, standing in the quiet of this small town, Grace felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a very long time. 3 months had passed since Grace Wilson's Bentley broke down outside Riverside. 3 months since she'd met Andre Carter, the mechanic whose quiet dignity had challenged her prejudices and whose conversation had unexpectedly touched something in her that had been dormant for too long. Grace sat in her corner office on the 40th floor of the Wilson Global headquarters, staring out at the city skyline. The merger she'd been rushing to that day had gone through successfully. The company's third-quarter profits exceeded projections. By all measurable standards, Grace was at the top of her professional game. So why did she feel so restless? A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Her assistant, Thomas, entered carrying a stack of reports. The board meeting materials you requested, Ms. Wilson, he said, placing them on her desk. And your car is ready downstairs whenever you need it. Thank you, Thomas, Grace replied, then added, Actually, I'm going to drive myself today. I have a personal errand to run after the meeting. Thomas looked surprised but nodded. Of course. I'll let the driver know. After he left, Grace turned back to the window. The truth was, she hadn't been able to stop thinking about Riverside, about the auto shop with its smell of motor oil and coffee, about the mechanic with the steady hands and thoughtful eyes who had fixed more than just her car during those 3 days. She had stayed in town an extra day, as planned, helping Andre outline a proposal for his training program. They'd worked side by side in the small coffee shop, her expertise in business planning complementing his vision for the program. By the end of the day, they had the bones of a solid proposal that could attract grant funding. Their goodbye had been awkward, neither quite knowing what to say after the unexpected connection they'd formed. Grace had promised to email him a more polished version of the proposal once she was back in the city. She'd done so a week later, and they'd exchanged a few business-like emails about the project since then. But now, something more urgent had brought Riverside back to her mind. Last night, while reviewing acquisition targets for her investment firm, She'd come across a report about a major automotive corporation planning to close several of its certified repair centers in smaller communities, including one just outside Riverside. The closure would redirect all specialized repairs to their facility in the city, 3 hours away. For most people, this was just another business decision. For Grace, it represented an opportunity, both for her company and for Andre's auto shop. The board meeting dragged on longer than expected. By the time Grace was in her car, heading out of the city, it was already mid-afternoon. She hadn't called ahead. Part of her worried that Andre might not want to see her, that their connection had been just a momentary aberration in both their lives. The drive to Riverside gave her plenty of time to think. The last 3 months had been productive but strangely empty. She'd found herself comparing every business dinner to that simple meal at Lily's restaurant, every conversation to the one she'd had with Andre along the Riverside path. Something about those few days in Riverside had shifted something fundamental in her perception. As she drove into the familiar small town, Grace felt a flutter of nervousness that she rarely experienced in business settings. She pulled up outside Carter's Auto Repair, momentarily sitting in her car to gather her thoughts. The shop looked busy. Several cars were parked in the lot, and she could see movement inside the open garage door. Taking a deep breath, Grace stepped out of her car and walked toward the entrance. The bell jingled as she opened the door, just as she remembered. The older man at the counter, Ray, Andre's uncle, looked up, recognition dawning on his face. "Well, look who's back," he said with a friendly smile. "The Bentley giving you trouble again?" "No, it's running perfectly," Grace assured him. "I'm actually here to speak with Andre if he's available." Ray gestured toward the back of the shop. "He's finishing up with a customer. Should be done in a few minutes. Want some coffee while you wait?" Grace accepted the offered coffee and took a seat in the small waiting area. Through the window to the workshop, she could see Andre talking with an elderly woman beside an old station wagon. He was gesturing to something under the hood, explaining with the same patience he had shown when teaching Grace about her own engine. The elderly woman nodded, looking relieved, and Andre closed the hood of her car with a reassuring smile. As the woman left through a side door, Andre turned and caught sight of Grace through the window. His expression of surprise quickly transformed into a warm smile that made Grace's pulse quicken unexpectedly. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked through to the front office. "Grace, this is a surprise. Good surprise or bad surprise?" she asked, standing up. "Definitely good," he replied without hesitation. "What brings you back to Riverside?" Grace glanced at Ray, who took the hint remarkably well. "I just remembered I need to check on that parts order," he said, excusing himself to the back office. Once they were alone, Grace explained about the repair center closure she'd discovered. "It's going to create a service gap for specialized vehicles in this region," she concluded. "And I thought you might be interested in filling that gap." Andre leaned against the counter, considering her words. "I've heard rumors about the closure, but nothing official yet. And yes, it would create an opportunity. But expanding to handle that level of service would require significant investment. Equipment, certifications, training. That's actually why I'm here," Grace said, her business confidence returning. "I have a proposal for you." Andre raised an eyebrow. "A proposal?" "A business proposal," Grace clarified, though she felt a slight flush at his expression. "Wilson Global has an investment division focused on small business expansion. We provide capital in exchange for a minority stake in promising ventures." "And you think Carter's Auto Repair is a promising venture?" Andre asked, sounding both surprised and intrigued. "I do," Grace said firmly. "You have the technical expertise, the community reputation, and now a market opportunity. What you need is capital to scale up, which is where I come in." Andre looked thoughtful. "I don't know, Grace. Taking outside investment is a big step. This has been a family business for decades. It would remain one," Grace assured him. "My company would be a silent partner, providing funding but leaving day-to-day operations entirely in your hands. We'd benefit from your success without interfering in how you achieve it." "I'd need to think about this," Andre said. "Talk it over with Ray." "Of course," Grace nodded. "I wouldn't expect an immediate answer. In fact," she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I've prepared some preliminary numbers and terms for you to review. Take your time with it." Andre accepted the folder with a curious expression. You drove 3 hours to deliver this in person? Grace hesitated, then decided on honesty. The proposal could have been emailed. I wanted to see you. Andre's eyes softened. I'm glad you did. Are you staying in town tonight? I have a room at the Riverside Inn, Grace confirmed. I thought we could discuss this over dinner if you're free. And you could update me on the training program we worked on. Did you submit the proposal? I did, Andre nodded. We're waiting to hear back, but the initial feedback was positive. Your help made a big difference. I'm glad. Grace said sincerely, it's a program worth supporting. A customer entered the shop then, ending their private conversation. Andre greeted the man with easy familiarity, while Grace excused herself, promising to meet Andre at Lily's restaurant at 7. Back at the Riverside Inn, Grace changed out of her business suit into more casual clothes, dark jeans and a simple blouse, similar to what she'd worn during her previous stay. As she dressed, she found herself questioning her own motivations. Was this trip really just about a business opportunity? Or was she using business as an excuse to see Andre again? Both could be true, she realized. The investment opportunity was genuine. Andre's skills and the market gap created a perfect scenario for expansion. But she couldn't deny that she'd thought about him often in the past 3 months, wondering what might have developed if she'd stayed in Riverside longer. When she arrived at Lily's restaurant that evening, Andre was already waiting. He too had changed from his work clothes into dark pants and a blue button-down shirt that complemented his deep brown skin. Grace felt a flutter of appreciation that she quickly tried to suppress. This was a business dinner, she reminded herself. I've been reviewing your proposal, Andre said after they'd ordered. The terms are surprisingly generous. They're fair, Grace corrected. Based on realistic growth projections for your business if you expand to fill the service gap. Still, most investors would take advantage of the fact that I don't have many options for capital in a town this size. Grace shrugged. I'm not most investors, and I've seen your work firsthand. I know what you're capable of. Their conversation shifted between business details and more personal updates. Andre told her about some of the interesting repair jobs he'd handled in recent months. Grace shared stories about her more unusual clients and the challenges of the current market. How's the Bentley running? Andre asked as they finished their main course. Perfectly, Grace replied. In fact, I drove it here today. My usual driver was quite surprised when I told him I was driving myself. You have a driver? Andre looked amused. Of course you do. It's practical, not pretentious, Grace defended herself with a smile. I often work during car rides. It maximizes productivity. And here I thought you just enjoyed the finer things in life, Andre teased. Some finer things are worth enjoying, Grace admitted, meeting his eyes. I've found myself appreciating simpler pleasures more since my last visit here. A moment of charged silence passed between them. About the investment proposal, Andre said, changing the subject. I'm interested, but I have concerns about how it might change the character of the business. The community trusts us because we're local, because we've been here for generations. I don't want to lose that. I understand, Grace nodded. That's why the proposal specifies that the Carter family maintains complete operational control. My company would be investing in your vision, not imposing our own. And what about the training program? Andre asked. Would that still be a priority if we expanded? It should be an even bigger priority, Grace insisted. If you're going to service more specialized vehicles, you'll need more qualified technicians. The training program could be your pipeline for future talent. Andre's expression grew thoughtful. I hadn't considered that angle. It would benefit both the business and the community. Exactly, Grace said, warming to the topic. The best business decisions create value for everyone involved. That's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, actually. Oh? Andre prompted. Grace hesitated, then decided to share the thoughts that had been increasingly occupying her mind. My company has been very successful by traditional metrics, profit margins, growth rate, market share, but I've been questioning whether we're creating real value beyond making money. That's a significant question for someone in your position, Andre observed. It is, Grace acknowledged, and honestly it started during my stay here. Watching you work, seeing how what you do directly helps people in tangible ways. It made me think about my own work differently. Andre looked surprised. I wouldn't have expected fixing a broken-down Bentley to prompt an existential crisis. Grace laughed. Not a crisis exactly. More of a recalibration. I've started directing more of our investments toward businesses that create concrete value in communities, not just financial returns. Like auto repair shops in small towns? Andre asked with a smile. Exactly like that, Grace confirmed, returning his smile. As they shared dessert, Lily's famous apple pie, Grace found herself more relaxed than she'd been in months. There was something about Andre's presence that allowed her to be herself, without the constant performance that her position usually required. After dinner, they walked along the same riverside path they had 3 months earlier. The evening was cooler now, with the first hints of autumn in the air. Have you thought about what happens if I accept your investment offer? Andre asked as they walked. You'd have a business reason to visit Riverside regularly. I have thought about that, Grace admitted. It would be a benefit, not just a responsibility. Andre stopped walking, turning to face her directly. Grace, I need to ask, is this proposal really just about business? Grace took a deep breath. The business opportunity is genuine. But no, that's not the only reason I'm here. Then what is the other reason? Andre pressed gently. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, Grace said simply. About our conversations, about the way I felt while I was here, calmer, more authentic. I'd like to explore what that means, if you would. Andre was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the path. I've thought about you too, he finally said. But our lives are very different. You run a global company from a skyscraper. I fix cars in a small town. Different doesn't mean incompatible, Grace pointed out. Maybe we complement each other. And maybe in a few weeks or months, you'd get bored with small-town life and the novelty of dating a mechanic would wear off, Andre countered, though his tone was gentle. That's not who I am, Grace said firmly. And that's not what this is. I'm not suggesting we jump into anything serious right away, just that we give ourselves the chance to see what might develop. Andre's expression softened. I'd like that too, but I need you to know that I won't be making any business decisions based on personal feelings. If I accept your investment proposal, it will be because it's right for the shop, for Ray, and for this community. I wouldn't want it any other way, Grace assured him. The proposal stands on its own merits. They continued walking, their hands occasionally brushing against each other in a way that seemed both accidental and deliberate. As they neared the inn, Grace felt a sense of possibility that had been absent from her life for too long. I have meetings in the city tomorrow, she said reluctantly. But I could come back this weekend if you'd like to continue our discussion, both business and personal. I'd like that, Andre said, his voice warm. The shop is closed on Sundays. I could show you more of the area. It's a date, Grace said, then added with a small smile. A business date with personal elements. Andre laughed, the sound rich and genuine. You know, when you made that ridiculous marriage comment 3 months ago, I never imagined we'd end up here. Neither did I, Grace admitted. But I'm very glad my car broke down in exactly the right place. As they said goodnight, Grace realized that her impulsive, thoughtless comment had led to something unexpectedly meaningful. Her Bentley had indeed been fixed perfectly, and in the process, something within herself had begun to be repaired as well. 1 year had passed since Grace Wilson's Bentley had broken down outside the small town of Riverside. 1 year since her thoughtless comment to Andre Carter, "Fix this engine properly, and I'll marry you," a remark born of stress and prejudice that she still felt ashamed about. Now, on a bright spring morning, a crowd gathered outside the newly expanded Carter's Auto Technology Center. The original auto shop had been transformed into a state-of-the-art facility that maintained its hometown charm while offering services previously unavailable within a 100-mile radius. A large ribbon stretched across the entrance, waiting to be cut. Grace stood slightly to the side of the podium where Andre was preparing to address the gathered community members, local officials, and press. She wore a simple but elegant pantsuit, her CEO armor softened by the genuine smile she couldn't suppress as she watched him adjust the microphone. "Thank you all for coming today," Andre began, his deep voice confident as he addressed the crowd. A year ago, Carter's Auto Repair was a small family business with big dreams. Today, those dreams have become reality, thanks to the support of this community, the hard work of our team, and a partnership that began with a broken-down Bentley. Laughter rippled through the crowd, many of whom knew parts of the story. This expanded center will provide specialized automotive services that previously required a 3-hour drive to the city, Andre continued. But more importantly, it will house the Carter Automotive Training Program, offering young people in our community the chance to learn valuable skills and build careers right here at home. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. Grace felt a swell of pride as she watched Andre speak. His vision for the training program had been the aspect of the expansion that most excited him from the beginning, even more than the cutting-edge equipment or increased business opportunities. The past year had been transformative for them both. After that second visit to Riverside, when Grace had presented her investment proposal, she had returned nearly every weekend. The 3-hour drive that once seemed an inconvenience had become something she looked forward to, a transition period between her hectic city life and the more grounded existence she'd found in Riverside. Andre had accepted her investment offer after careful consideration, insisting on maintaining the shop's identity and community focus. Together they had planned the expansion, with Andre providing the technical expertise and vision, while Grace contributed business strategy and capital connections. But their collaboration had extended far beyond business. Weekends in Riverside had turned into dinners in the city when Andre visited for certification courses. Phone calls about equipment purchases had evolved into late-night conversations about their lives, hopes, and the different worlds they each inhabited. "I'd like to invite my business partner, Grace Wilson, to join me," Andre said, drawing Grace's attention back to the present moment. She walked to the podium, feeling the eyes of the community on her. A year ago, she would have been perfectly at ease commanding attention. Today, she felt a flutter of nervousness, knowing these people were important to Andre and that many still viewed her as an outsider. "Thank you," she said, taking her place beside Andre. "When I first came to Riverside, it was an unplanned detour, literally a breakdown on my journey elsewhere. I had no idea it would become one of the most important destinations in my life." Grace looked out at the faces watching her. Ray, beaming with pride. Lily from the restaurant nodding encouragingly. The local high school principal, who had helped develop the training program curriculum, and dozens of community members who had gradually accepted her presence in their town. Business partnerships are usually evaluated by profit margins and return on investment, Grace continued. But the most valuable returns from this partnership can't be measured on a balance sheet. They're found in the opportunities this center will create, in the skills it will nurture, and in the community it will help sustain. She turned slightly toward Andre, their eyes meeting briefly. "I've learned more in the past year about value, community, and authentic success than in all my previous years in business. And for that lesson, I'm profoundly grateful." Andre's smile warmed his eyes in the way that never failed to affect her. Together, they moved to the ribbon stretched across the entrance. Local officials handed them a large pair of ceremonial scissors. "Ready?" Andre asked. Grace nodded, and together they cut the ribbon as cheers erupted from the crowd. The next hour was a blur of conversations as people toured the new facility. Grace found herself answering questions about the business aspects of the expansion, while Andre proudly demonstrated the new equipment and explained the training program that would begin with its first class of students next month. As the crowd began to thin, a young reporter from the local newspaper approached Grace. "Ms. Wilson, you're the CEO of a major investment firm in the city. What made you decide to invest in a small-town auto shop?" Grace considered her answer carefully. Sometimes the best opportunities aren't the most obvious ones. Carter's had all the elements we look for: exceptional expertise, strong community foundations, and vision for growth that serves a genuine market need. The reporter jotted notes, then asked with a hint of gossip in her tone, "Is it true that when you first met Mr. Carter, you told him you'd marry him if he could fix your car?" Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks. She'd hoped that particular detail hadn't made it into the local rumor mill, though she should have known better in a small town. "I made an inappropriate comment when we first met," Grace acknowledged, deciding honesty was the best approach. It was disrespectful and stemmed from stress and unexamined biases. Fortunately, Mr. Carter was professional enough to overlook it and focus on the actual work at hand. "And now you're business partners," the reporter observed. "Yes," Grace confirmed. "It's a partnership based on mutual respect and complementary strengths." Mr. Carter understands automotive technology and community needs in a way I never could, while I contribute business strategy and investment capital. The reporter seemed about to ask another question when Andre approached, resting his hand lightly on Grace's back. I see you've met our local journalist, he said with a smile. Lisa's family has run the Riverside Gazette for 3 generations. We were just discussing your partnership, Lisa explained. It's quite the success story. It is, Andre agreed. Though like most success stories, it's had its complications and adjustments along the way. That was certainly true, Grace reflected. The partnership, both business and personal, had faced its share of challenges. There had been skepticism from some community members about an outsider investing in their local business. Meanwhile, Grace's board of directors had questioned her frequent absences from the city and her growing personal involvement in what they viewed as a relatively small investment. Finding balance between their two worlds hadn't been easy. Andre had valid concerns about becoming just an occasional visitor in Grace's high-powered life, while she worried about being perpetually viewed as an outsider in his close-knit community. They had navigated these issues with honest communication and compromises on both sides. After the reporter moved on to interview Ray, Andre guided Grace to a quieter corner of the building. You okay? Lisa can be persistent with her questions. I'm fine, Grace assured him. Though I wish that particular comment hadn't become part of local lore, Andre chuckled. Small towns have long memories, but most people see it as the beginning of a good story now, not something to hold against you. I hope so, Grace said. I've been trying to live it down for a year. Speaking of which, Andre said, reaching into his pocket, there's something I wanted to give you today. A sort of anniversary present. He pulled out a small velvet box and Grace felt her heart skip a beat. They had been officially dating for months now, but neither had spoken of long-term commitments. The 3-hour distance between their homes remained a practical challenge, and they were both independent people with established lives. Andre opened the box to reveal not a ring, but a key. It's not what you're thinking, he said with a smile at her surprised expression. It's a key to the office here. I had it made for you so you can use the space when you're in town for weekend visits. I know you often need to work and the hotel desk isn't ideal. Grace took the key, unexpectedly touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. Thank you. It's perfect. It's practical, Andre corrected with a teasing echo of her own words from months ago. Not romantic. Though the romance is definitely there too. Grace laughed softly. Practical can be romantic when it shows you've been paying attention. The last of the visitors were leaving now, with Ray escorting them to the door. The newly expanded center was quiet, sunlight streaming through the large windows that had been installed during the renovation. We did it, Grace said, looking around at what they had created together. We did, Andre agreed, following her gaze. Though this is just the beginning. The real work starts when those students arrive next month. Grace nodded, knowing how much the training program meant to him. They had designed it to be accessible to anyone in the community with an interest in automotive technology, regardless of their background or financial situation. Scholarships, funded partly by Wilson Global and partly by local businesses, would ensure that cost wasn't a barrier. I've been thinking, Grace said, turning to face Andre directly. The commute between here and the city is getting tiresome. Andre's expression grew serious. I know we've talked about this before. I understand if you need to scale back your visits. Your company needs you, and Grace placed her finger gently against his lips, stopping his words. That's not what I mean. I've been exploring the possibility of opening a satellite office for Wilson Global here in Riverside. Andre's eyes widened in surprise. Here? But there's no financial market in a town this size. There doesn't need to be, Grace explained. Most of our operations can be handled remotely with today's technology. I'd still go to the city for important meetings and client presentations, but I could do the majority of my work from here. You'd do that? Andre asked, looking both pleased and concerned. Move your life to Riverside? What about your apartment, your social connections in the city? I'd keep the apartment for now, Grace said. As for social connections, honestly, Andre, I've developed more meaningful relationships here in the past year than in a decade in the city. People there know CEO Grace Wilson. People here are getting to know just Grace. Andre took her hands in his. And who is just Grace? Are you sure she wants small-town life? Grace smiled, squeezing his hands. I'm still figuring that out. But I know she wants to be where she feels most herself. And increasingly that's here. With you, with this community, with the work we're doing together. I don't want you to make this decision for me, Andre said seriously. It has to be right for you. It's not for you, Grace assured him. It's for us and for me. This past year has changed my perspectives on what success really means. I'm not abandoning my company or my career, just rebalancing my priorities. Andre studied her face, seeming to search for any signs of doubt. Finding none, he pulled her into a warm embrace. Then I'm all for it. Having you here more often would make everything better. Over his shoulder, Grace could see Ray locking the front doors, giving them privacy for their moment. The older man had become something of a surrogate father figure to her over the past year, sharing stories about Andre's childhood and quietly offering wisdom when tensions arose between them. There is one more thing, Grace said as they stepped apart. Something I've been meaning to tell you. Andre raised an eyebrow, waiting. The training program has received additional funding, Grace explained. Enough to expand it beyond automotive technology to include business operations, accounting, customer service. All the skills needed to run a successful shop, not just work in one. Andre's face lit up. That's incredible. Where did the funding come from? Wilson Global has a foundation for educational initiatives, Grace said. I presented the expanded program to the board and they approved it unanimously. You never mentioned you were working on this, Andre said, clearly moved. Grace smiled. I wanted it to be a surprise for the opening. The foundation is also establishing a scholarship in your father's name for students with exceptional potential. Andre was silent for a moment, visibly processing this news. Then he pulled Grace close again, his embrace tighter this time. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Thank you. He would have loved knowing his name was helping young people build their futures. When they separated, Grace saw Ray watching them from across the room with a knowing smile. He gave her a subtle thumbs up before disappearing into the back office, leaving them alone. So, Andre said, his voice returning to normal. A satellite office in Riverside, an expanded training program, and us finding a way to bridge our two worlds. Quite a different outcome than either of us expected a year ago. Very different, Grace agreed with a smile, and infinitely better. Andre took her hand, leading her toward the exit. Lily's expecting us for a celebration dinner. Half the town will probably show up. Grace felt a flutter of happiness at the thought. A year ago, being the center of attention in a small-town gathering would have made her uncomfortable. Now she looked forward to it. As they stepped outside into the spring sunshine, Andre paused, turning to face her with a serious expression. You know, you never did fulfill your end of that bargain. What bargain? Grace asked, momentarily confused. A mischievous smile spread across Andre's face. You said you'd marry me if I fixed your engine. I fixed it perfectly, as I recall. Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks. That was a thoughtless, inappropriate comment that I deeply regret. Oh, I know, Andre said, his eyes twinkling. And I'm certainly not holding you to it. But it's interesting how life works out sometimes, isn't it? He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a second small box. Unlike the first one, when he opened this box, it did contain a ring. A simple but elegant band with a small diamond. I'm not asking because of some ridiculous comment made a year ago, Andre said softly. I'm asking because this year has shown me that what we have is rare and worth building a life around. So Grace Wilson, CEO and the woman who has completely upended my quiet existence, will you marry me? Not because you have to, but because you want to. Grace felt tears spring to her eyes, unexpected emotion welling up within her. Yes, she whispered, then more firmly. Yes, I will. As Andre slipped the ring onto her finger, Grace marveled at how a broken-down car and a thoughtless comment had somehow led to this moment, to a partnership that encompassed business and love, to a future she could never have envisioned for herself a year ago. Andre kissed her, right there on the sidewalk in front of the newly expanded auto center, not caring who might see. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers, ready to go tell everyone at Lily's that we're going to give them something else to talk about. Grace laughed, feeling lighter and more certain than she ever had before. Absolutely. Small towns love a good story, right? And ours is just getting to the good part. Hand in hand, they walked toward the restaurant where their friends and community waited. leaving behind the auto center that stood as physical proof of what could happen when prejudice gave way to respect, when differences became strengths, and when an unexpected detour turned out to be exactly the right path all along.